The content provided in this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended for a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your doctor or other qualified health professionals with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast.
Let's go on holidays. Pack your bags and get ready for a break. But what if your pump fails, or you run out of supplies, or you need to go to hospital, or you get a vomiting bug, or you get an infection?
Get your pump charger.
Supplies randomly disappear.
You have faulty supplies.
You got a lot, 31,000 feet.
On today's episode, we will be unpacking travelling with type 1 diabetes. We're your hosts, Isabella McGee and Sebastian Harris. This is Life on the Level. If you're listening, you probably have or know someone with type 1 diabetes. We're here to give you the knowledge and encouragement so you can thrive. Join us as we dive into all things type 1, real experiences, expert insights, and practical strategies. Whether I am going to a friend's house or going on a day out, wherever I'm packing for, I've got 10 times as many things as I need. I am organised. If I'm going overseas or even over the border, I've got a whole itinerary, Google Docs, hyperlinks, colour coordinated, highlighted, all done. And I think having to pack for diabetes on top of that is just underestimated.
Yeah.
A lot, like, I think people go, oh, we'll just go and do this, or let's just go and do this. And I'm like, no, I need to know where we're, like, part of the reason why I have the itineraries and stuff is because I need to know.
Yeah, best cater to.
Yeah, I need to know what I'm doing. I need to know where I'm going. I need to know how much sort of insulin and whatever that I need to pack. And it's quite difficult when you don't have that, but it's also incredibly stressful.
Yeah. So one of the points that you mentioned was having to pack enough medication, stuff like that. Like, how do you manage around that stuff? Especially since you've just come back from overseas.
Yeah, I know. I've always been told pack 3 times the amount of things that you need and then divide it by 2.
Oh, I've never been told that.
I just pack.
You just pack?
I just chuck as many as I think I need times 10. And, like, I think I would rather have that than not have enough.
That fear of being in a different country and not knowing exactly where to get the supplies.
Yeah, or it fails or whatever. I remember I was at the airport and you know how you have to get pat down.
Yeah.
It's funny to me, but I got so many stares, and I remember I had a trainer, like a girl who was being trained to do the pat downs, and she had like someone teaching her how to do it. And as she was doing it, I was explaining to her, and she nearly touched my insulin pump. And they're like, no, you can't touch that. And it was just interesting watching her and everyone staring at me. I had to take my shoes off and everything. But people looking at you like, what sort of drugs is she smuggling in?
Yeah.
Prescription drugs. But it's quite interesting to like have to go through all of that. And then I remember like I went just to Sydney the other weekend to see a friend, and I only went for like a weekend, and she was like, why didn't you just have carry-on? And I was like, well, I can't just have carry-on because I've got to have all my medication in it. Like, you can't just have one small bag.
To speak on that as well, I know someone who has a sibling that is type 1 diabetic, and he said to his older sister, who's a lot more vocal than he is, can you please go through and pretend like you're the one that has
yeah, because it's a lot.
Diabetes.
It's a lot. So many people were staring at me, and I just sort of go, oh, whatever. Like, but it's quite intimidating, and you do get like quite nervous if you do care about that sort of stuff.
Because I know that since I've gone overseas to places like Europe and the Middle East, they really monitor that stuff really closely.
Yeah.
Especially like when we were going between Jordan to Italy, they were super strict and very particular about looking through every single part of it just to make sure. Probably would have been there for like 20 minutes just to get them to check everything.
Gosh.
It's just mental.
Yeah. I remember when I was overseas, I never take my pump off. I haven't taken my pump off. I've only taken it off once, actually, and this was the only time. And I thought, because we were going, in the water and snorkeling and stuff, I was like, you know what? I'm going to not have my pump on this day, and I'm just going to do like injections like I used to do, like MDI injections. And I had the pump off, whatever, turned it off, and I couldn't turn it back on.
Oh.
Well, I've never had to turn it off, right? So I was like, Oh, I thought it would be easy. I thought you just press a button.
Press a button.
No, that's not. It's not as easy as that. And I remember trying to contact my diabetes educator, and I had like a phone plan that I could, talk to her while I was overseas. But she didn't reply, and I was like, well, what do I do? Like, if you're in that sort of situation, and thank goodness I guess you do just pack extra supplies like I did. Like, I also packed pens and a glucometer as well, which I think you should always do because technology, you can't always trust it, yada.
Good old stuff.
Yeah, it is annoying having to pack that extra stuff when you feel like you definitely won't need it. But then when you do need it, that's probably when you haven't packed it. And I don't want to be in that situation while I'm overseas.
Yeah, I'd much rather have like 1 or 2 vials of insulin go off because it's been out of the sun if I take that extra just in case. Because I'd much rather be in the situation where I have it rather than not.
Yeah, definitely.
Because there was recently a circumstance where my brother got really unwell, and that was a hurdle to try and get over.
Like while he was overseas.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were in Jordan at the time, and we were just kind of chilling at the Dead Sea. Like, it was very nice. Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
Very salty as well. But he had a really bad sickness that went around, and we were flying out the next day quite early, and it was like they had to attach him to like IV drips on the bed, and there was like all this like blood on the bed because I had to keep checking blood and stuff. And it just, if it was without the diabetes, it would have been awful, but with the diabetes, it was even more awful.
Yeah, more awful.
Yeah, like it's just one of those things where it's like,
exacerbated.
Other than having some sickness, it's have I considered everything else on top of that?
Yeah.
And I mean, people with diabetes, their body doesn't treat them well anyway. I mean, our pancreas already hates us enough. So like, how you deal with that with everything else?
My body hates me.
Yeah. That's what it feels like. I mean,
it does sometimes. It does actually feel like that. You're like, you are working against me here.
Yeah. I mean, it's only 1% of the pancreas as well. So it's like,
get rid of all of it.
Yeah.
Maybe don't. But for me, a big thing is having food on me at all times. And like, I'm very well aware that I'm the type of person that would rather have so much food that it goes to waste rather than not have enough and go low. Because I've been low and like, I've consumed large quantities of food when I am low. Like, don't underestimate that. But when we were overseas, we sort of got in at like late at night and, well, not that late, but we thought shops would still be open, but everything was shut.
Yeah.
And like there was no real restaurants or anything nearby. And this was like the first night. And the friend that I was with, I was just like, I just need food. Like, I just need to find like a service station. I just need to find something. And we didn't have anything for 24 hours. Like, I obviously had my jelly beans and like things like that, but I just like to have more than that. I just felt so uneasy not having a lot of food with me. Like, I knew I had enough if I went low, 3 times, but I think just not having the normal amount of food that I do on me at all times really stressed me out. And then I remember like the next day, she was stressing as well because she's never like had to deal with someone with diabetes at that close level. So it was quite interesting to witness her stressing for me.
It's
and I was
always
like,
the other person as well when
I know. I was like, girl, I'm all good. I just need to find food.
Yeah.
Like, and I would have been fine if we didn't, and I was. But like, it's just like a stressor that I didn't have it just in case. And then like the next day, we went to the buffet and we like stored all this. I had so much extra food. Yeah. I was like, I am storing this and keeping it with me because I'd rather have too much than not enough. But it was just like, it was a really funny feeling knowing how odd I felt not having too much food with me, like just in case. Like, it made me feel I felt really like, just like stress. I was stressed.
Yeah, and traveling takes it out of you most of the time.
Yeah.
But then it's like that as well.
Yeah, because you can't bring stuff like over the border. So I was like, well, I don't know. Like, what do I do? But then.
Yeah, and then also the other thing is trying to access supplies in different countries and stuff like that in different areas.
My gosh, I couldn't even access food.
Yeah, I mean, like thankfully, a lot of the countries that I can speak to, particularly in like Europe and the Middle East, they're pretty good. Like, their medical system is really good.
Yeah.
But one thing that really was confusing, just as like a weird story, was when we were in Switzerland, we were at this like small little resort town that was in kind of the middle of nowhere. And we were just trying to figure out what was wrong because we were both, my whole family was pretty much feeling sick. And I'm like, my ketones are raised. I'm like throwing up the whole day. And we went to the doctor. He was really friendly. He's like, what's your blood? And I said, oh, my blood's like 3.1. He's like, 3.1?
Like your ketones, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I was like, 3.1. And he's like, how are you not like shaking on the floor? I said, well, 3.1 ketones. And he goes, ketones? We don't use ketones. So they measured purely by the BGL. So that was an interesting thing as well. But the other good thing is healthcare is quite expensive over there, but thankfully you can still get quite a bit on rebate back anyway.
Yeah.
But it's just, they're pretty good with supplies. You just might have to go a bit of extra distance is all.
Yeah. I definitely would recommend travel insurance.
Yes.
Like, I remember when I was looking at travel insurance, I was like, oh, I don't want to do it. And then I was like doing up the quote with mom and she was like, oh, like it's only like $100. Don't even worry about it. And I was like, I'm going to do it. Thanks, mom. I'll have a look again. It was like tripled it because I have diabetes and like nothing else wrong with me. Just the fact that I have diabetes tripled it. And I was like, that is just... it makes me mad. It makes me mad.
Is
like,
it really
I
that big
it.
of a difference? Like
Apparently,
3 times?
Apparently. I don't know. But like, it makes me so mad that like, I definitely think you should do it because I would hate to be overseas and then be in a situation where I have to pay an arm and a leg, not my pancreas because it doesn't work. They don't want that.
Oh, they can take that.
yeah, feel free. But like, I'd hate to be in that situation rather than just pay that couple of extra, just as like a safety thing.
Yeah, it's a good safety net to have.
Yeah, 100%.
Because I know that when I was just diagnosed, we were about to go overseas for 3-4 weeks. And I got mine really early on, almost like by mistake. But when we were talking to the doctors after we came back, I was just curious and said, well, what would have happened if we found it later?
Yeah.
And they said you probably would have been at the top of the Parthenon in Athens in 35-degree heat. I'm going, what a horrible place to be stuck.
And so dehydrated as well,
Yeah.
like on top of your diabetes, it's being in 30. Oh,
because
yuck.
I'm thankful that they discovered it then. Thanks, Mum, by the way. And I was thankful I got to experience that. But had it not, and if I just randomly become a person with diabetes at that point, travel insurance, I don't have it. So
true.
So it'd be like this, what do you do? What do you do?
Would they cover that? If you got diagnosed, like if you like weren't diabetic and then you went overseas and then you had travel insurance and then you got diabetes. Someone look into that for me because that's actually quite interesting. I don't know. It was funny, like, so in Fiji, a lot of people over there are type 2. There's like, I didn't come across many type 1s.
Yeah.
And the amount of people who not only like questioned what my insulin pump and CGM were, but also like not like why do I have it, but like what is it? Like what even is that? Because I didn't see anyone else over there with any sort of device or anything like that. And maybe that's just like who I came across, but like a lot of them over there were type 2 and a lot of them were saying that like they didn't even know really what type 1 was, which was just crazy to me. But I felt like the whole trip people were just like, what is, like, so many more questions than over here.
Yeah.
And it gives you like a real insight into the sort of like the different ways that people deal with things in different countries.
Just even the access to education about all that stuff.
Diets as well, you know, with having such a high number of type 2s, I was like, well, like it was just quite a cultural awakening, if you will.
Yeah, and you really begin to realise, I imagine, a situation like that, the real big difference between the two.
Oh, yeah. And then also, like, I guess if you were to lose medical supplies or you didn't pack enough overseas, that's another thing that, like, really stressed me out.
Yeah.
Like, what do I, like, on top of not having enough food and stuff, it was more like, what do I do if I lose my medical supplies and stuff? I remember, like, because type 1s are more prone to fractures. I fractured my toe. I fractured a couple of times, so I'm like, yeah. So I was like, oh, here we go, not again. If you must know, I slipped on a rock. So that was, yeah, that's real embarrassing.
She said Ford line or something.
Oh, yeah, sorry, it was that lion that I caught. So embarrassing. Anyway, and I remember being like on the boat back because we had to go out to islands and then come back. And I was like, do you guys have like a medical kit? And they gave me like the bit of cloth. And I was like, oh, I can't put that on my foot. But it was just funny to see like
like strange to witness how their medical sort of system was in place compared to what we have. Like, it's just, I had completely also taken that for advantage, I guess, more than, just anything else.
Yeah, we're super lucky in that.
Yeah. And I like, that was a big perspective for me to see like what they do and how they deal with things differently.
Yeah, and even when like my family and I were overseas and we were looking around and just going into like your pharmacy or your chemist, the price of supplies was also an interesting thing to behold. Like in Australia, it's relatively cheap because it's subsidized, but overseas it's very, very expensive. Like,
yeah.
But again, if you need it, you're going to pay the money.
Depends where you go as well,
Yeah.
I guess.
Because I mean, a lot of the places that I've been are predominantly in Europe, so that's pretty good and very similar to Australia with that stuff. But I also know that some other places, like when I was younger, I went to Thailand. I don't know if they'd be as nice, but I'm sure if you need it, you're going to be able to find supplies somewhere.
Yeah. Another funny thing that I experienced was like, and I think I've definitely experienced this in Australia as well, so I'm not just like calling out other countries, but signing waivers when you're doing things like snorkeling or whatever you're doing, and just like you have to say that, or even getting a massage, just say that you have type 1 diabetes. And every time I sign those forms, I'm like, oh, here we go. Like, here we go. Because it's like, no. Type 1 diabetes. And I'm like, and the questions you get and like the lack of understanding of the impact of it and that it's not really relevant to the task unless I'm like low or whatever is just, it's a whole conversation that like I don't really want to have with people.
Yeah, it is definitely something I realized. Like even just a few weeks ago, I got a tattoo and part of it is like anything that inhibits like healing. And I'm like, do I put it down? Do I not put it down? Diabetes. And then, but thankfully it was really cool because I got to have a conversation with all these people about like, oh, well, how does it affect it?
Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing as well, like being able to educate people overseas about the illness, especially when they hadn't really come across many insulin pumps and many CGMs. That was like quite interesting. I did meet one other person over there that had type 1 diabetes, and he was using like glucometer and a pen still, and he wasn't really like, didn't really know that it was accessible. He didn't really know it was a thing that you could do and didn't really understand it. And that was crazy to me, like that he hadn't really even experienced that as an option.
Yeah. I mean, as a person with diabetes in Australia, we're pretty lucky, and just from like my own experience of going around, you just see the different cultures and people and how they kind of best manage stuff like that. So it's a bit of an eye-opener for me.
Yeah. I think one other thing that I would consider to do if you are traveling overseas or traveling wherever with someone is to make sure that the person that you're with understands what you're going through. Like, I went with a good friend of mine and she knew what diabetes was, but she obviously didn't know like the full depth of it. And I was like willing to explain it to her while we were there. And but if something happened to me, she did need to know. And just like sitting her down and explaining it all to her, she just had no idea of the 24/7 job that it is, and just like how much it impacts my life and everything that I do. Like I remember her saying to me, like, I just thought you like, no, I just thought you gave needles, and like I didn't know. Like I didn't know. And I was like, yeah, I know this is. And watching her see what it was like to travel with someone with type 1 diabetes was just really interesting, because she sort of started to see the impact of it on my life.
Yeah, and the other thing that I might add is, if you have relatives at home with you, if you're not traveling with them, definitely give them a copy of the itinerary.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely make sure they are at least aware of where you are in case something does happen.
Find my iPhone on.
Oh, yeah. How are you going to get there? Like it's not going to be easy, but it's like at least they know. At least they know if something happens, you're like...
Check in with people,
Oh, I'm dying, Mum. Like,
dying.
It's like...
Find my iPhone, Mum. This is where I died.
Yeah, exactly. Put a grave here. But like, just make sure there are people at home.
Send insulin, please.
Yeah, exactly. Like an SOS kit. But just make sure there are people at home who know where you are. And
definitely.
Just regularly update them as well.
Yeah, but also don't be scared to travel, I think. A big thing for me is that because it's the unknown, I was so scared to go overseas and so scared to experience other things. And I'm so glad I did do that, because that was my first time traveling overseas this year.
Yeah.
Because I did have that massive fear of like, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if they take my stuff? Like, I don't know. I don't know what I know. I don't know. But I think just, research what you can and just do it. Like, have plans, be prepared for things, but just enjoy yourself. And you can enjoy yourself.
Yeah, because traveling is the best education, I think, because you find out so much about the world and kind of where we are and stuff like that. So
it depends what you're doing, but I get what you mean.
Bungee jumping, I'm sure you'll get an education. Just hope it doesn't find out about physics too bad.
Educating about the sky.
But it is something that you learn a lot from, and it's one of those things that I can say, like, just go for it. Traveling is amazing, and sure, there's lots of things to be worried about and scared, and there are so many things that you can see, though, that you can't see if you don't travel. And just commit to it.
Yeah, and ask friends, ask other people with diabetes, speak to your team.
Yeah.
Just and have a support network to talk about your concerns with. Whatever you can to make it easier for you, I think, is really important as well, because you do want to have a good time while you're traveling.
Spot on. For more information, you can go to our show notes for links to the NDSS Diabetes Youth Zone website for more travel tips. You'll also find other useful links and resources to support your travel plans. And that's the end of this episode of Life on the Level.
See you next time.
As we wrap up another episode of Life on the Level, we want to thank you for being part of the supportive community. Your stories, questions, and just being here fuel our mission to offer meaningful support and education to people living with diabetes. Keep the conversation going, stay connected, and remember, together, we're stronger. Don't forget to follow the show to hear more wherever you listen to your podcasts.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Diabetes Services Scheme. The NDSS is an initiative of the Australian Government and is administered by Diabetes Australia.
Diabetes Australia acknowledges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional owners and custodians of this country. We pay the utmost respect to them, their cultures, and to their elders, past and present. We extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Diabetes Australia is committed to improving health outcomes for all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people affected by diabetes and those at risk.